The sky was a canvas of fire and ash. The great cities of Earth, New York, London, Beijing, São Paulo, had been turned into monuments of conquest, their spires adorned with Zeltrak's Dominion banners. The once vibrant streets now echoed with the rhythmic march of alien patrols, boots of chitinous alloy crushing the last remnants of resistance. Humanity had fought like demons, but the Dominion was too vast, too advanced. Their warships had darkened the heavens, their plasma lances burning entire cities into smoldering ruin. No warning, no demands, no mercy. In the end, Earth had not surrendered. It had been subjugated. Now the species that once dreamed of stars toiled in chains. General Marcus Steele stood in the ruins of what was once the Pentagon, the heart of Earth's military command. Now, it was nothing more than a prison complex for political dissidents, officers, scientists, and rebels too valuable to kill, too dangerous to release. The Zeltraks had turned Earth's leaders into examples. Public executions were broadcast across every screen, reinforcing a single brutal message: obey or be erased. Steele had watched from the shadows as the last remnants of Earth's government were paraded before the world. The president had been the first to fall. The Secretary of Defense followed, then the generals, the admirals, every last symbol of human defiance, broken and humiliated. He should have died with them. Instead, he had disappeared. For 20 years, Marcus Steele had moved through the underground, slipping through the cracks of the Dominion's control. He had built the Ember Network, a resistance hidden in the depths of Earth's former might, beneath the ruins of Chicago, in the shadows of Tokyo's once bright skyline, in the blackened remains of Moscow. The Dominion called them vermin. Steele called them the last hope. And tonight, the embers would become a wildfire. On the towering orbital citadel, suspended above the ruined Earth, Vishkar, supreme governor of Sol, basked in the luxury of his throne room. He had won. Earth was broken. Its people were pacified. Its warriors had been turned into chattel, working the Dominion's forges, feeding its endless war machine. The humans were resilient, yes, but they lacked the one thing the Dominion had perfected: order. They are predictable, Vishkar mused, sipping a glass of spiced Kirith nectar imported from the Zeltrak's homeworld. They struggle, they rebel, and they die. In the end, all species bend the knee. He turned to his personal attendants, 2 human slaves, both young, both blank-faced with implanted obedience chips. This was mercy. The Dominion could have exterminated their race. Instead, they had been given purpose. "Tell me," Vishkar addressed his second-in-command, Admiral Tarkor, a monstrous, 4-armed warrior with plated emerald armor. "Has there been any activity?" Tarkor let out a low rumble. "The usual. Small pockets of defiance. Bombings, assassinations. Nothing of consequence." Vishkar smirked. "Good. Let them hope. Hope is the best leash of all." In that moment, every Dominion screen flickered. The lights dimmed. The encrypted comm channels, thought to be impenetrable, cracked open like eggshells. Across the planet, from the forced labor camps of Mars to the deep mines of Europa, a single message played in perfect synchronization. A voice, strong, unyielding, human. "We are awake." Steele watched from the command deck of the Ember Network's hidden base, a deep underground facility buried beneath Antarctica's frozen wastelands. He turned to his crew, engineers, hackers, former soldiers, all wearing the sigil of the rebellion, a burning ember surrounded by a broken chain. "Is the virus in place?" Steele asked. "Affirmative," replied Lena O'Donnell, a former cyber warfare specialist from the old world. "Every comm channel, every control node, it's all been compromised. We own their networks." "And the fleet?" A grim chuckle from Captain Raul Vasquez, leader of the hidden Mars shipyards. "Locked and loaded. We've got 12 stolen Dominion warships, armed to the teeth, and ready to burn them out of the sky." Steele nodded. Then we move. Tonight. The first strike. The Dominion's pride had been its greatest weakness. They thought themselves untouchable. The ISS Vengeance, a stolen Dominion battleship, detonated its cloaking field and launched from the Pacific Trench, its thrusters burning white-hot against the darkened sky. Within seconds, 5 orbital sentry stations went dark, their automated defenses overridden by Ember network slicers. On Earth's surface, the labor camps erupted into chaos. Explosions rocked the forced work districts of New Delhi, Berlin, and Johannesburg as sleeper cells emerged from hiding. The rebellion had begun. Panic spread through the Dominion ranks as human prisoners overpowered their alien captors, using stolen weapons, homemade explosives, and sheer unrelenting rage. The chains of Europa, the massive orbital prison that processed captured humans, shattered into 1,000 burning fragments as rebels hijacked a Dominion dreadnought and turned its plasma lances on the very station that once broke their kind. Earth was no longer silent. On the orbital citadel, Vishkar stood frozen, his glass of nectar slipping from his claws, shattering against the marble floor. Across every screen, Marcus Steele's face appeared, battle-worn, scarred but alive, a ghost of the old world. For 20 years. Steele's voice echoed through every Dominion channel. You made us suffer. You thought you had broken us. His eyes burned like the fire of a dying sun. But you failed. Vishkar stepped back, his throat tightening. We are awake. Then, the sky erupted in war. The sky burns. The night sky above Earth had once been a place of wonder, dotted with stars, a reminder of humanity's boundless curiosity. Tonight, it was a battlefield. Fire and metal rained down as explosions rippled through the Dominion's orbital defenses. The ISS Vengeance, Steele's stolen warship, roared through the darkness, weaving between wreckage and Dominion fighters, scrambling to respond to the sudden impossible assault. In the past, a single human ship would have been irrelevant, laughable. But tonight, it was the match that would set the entire Dominion ablaze. Weapons free! Steele barked, his voice carrying through the command deck. Torpedoes screamed from their bays, trailing white-hot contrails as they found their marks. Dominion destroyers, massive orbital supply depots, and tactical control nodes. On Earth's surface, resistance cells synchronized their movements. As explosions tore through Dominion strongholds, cities rose in flames, not in destruction, but in defiance. For the first time in 20 years, humanity struck back. The chains begin to break from the depths of Earth's prison camps. The ember of hope ignited into an inferno. Johannesburg resistance. Led by ex-police officers and former military engineers, they hijacked an entire Dominion Walker battalion, turning the alien war machines against their former masters. Shanghai uprising. Laborers in the orbital foundry district staged a massive prison break, flooding the streets with tens of thousands of freed humans, now armed with whatever weapons they could scavenge. The ruins of Washington, D.C., a place the Dominion had long abandoned as a graveyard of human failure. From its ruins emerged Lena O'Donnell, cyber warfare specialist, hacking into Dominion supply lines, rerouting ships, and disabling automated turrets from within enemy networks. And in the hidden depths of the Mars resistance shipyards, Captain Raul Vasquez and his crew launched their stolen fleet, 12 Dominion warships, now bearing the mark of the rebellion. You wanted slaves? Vasquez growled over an open comm channel as his ships erupted from Mars's shadow, firing torpedoes into the nearest Dominion command carrier. You got devils instead. The Dominion fleet, for the first time in recorded history, was caught unprepared. Back aboard the Vengeance, Steele watched the battlefield unfold with military precision. It wasn't chaos. It was a symphony of rebellion. But there was one problem. The Dominion was staggered, but not broken. Their fleet was still vastly superior, their reinforcements only minutes away. If they regrouped, the rebellion would be crushed before it could spread. Steele turned to his comms officer. "Patch me through to all resistance channels. I need every leader, every fighter listening." A beat. Then, "You're live, General." He exhaled. This was it. The moment that would define history. His voice echoed across every screen, every comlink, every Dominion-controlled channel. "This is General Marcus Steele. If you can hear me, you are the resistance." Across the burning cities, fighters paused. Civilians huddled in the dark lifted their heads, and slaves in the Dominion's labor camps stopped working, their chains still clinging to their wrists. For 20 years, they told us we were weak, that we were broken, that we were nothing. They were wrong. Right now, all over this planet, all over the system, your brothers and sisters are rising, they are fighting, and we are winning. But this is only the beginning. The feed cut to live footage. Dominion dreadnoughts falling, orbital stations erupting in flame, human soldiers storming captured Dominion strongholds. Steele's voice hardened. "We have one chance, one moment to break them before they break us. There is no retreat, no surrender. We fight here, we fight now, until the last chain is shattered, until Earth is free." The response was immediate. From every corner of the occupied Earth, a single defiant roar rose. "Humanity stands." In the orbital citadel, Governor Vishkar trembled as he watched the screens. This was not how it was supposed to go. Humanity was supposed to be docile, broken, controlled. Instead, they were spreading like wildfire. With shaking claws, he turned to Admiral Tarkor. "Call for reinforcements." Tarkor didn't move. His slitted eyes remained fixed on the battle outside. On the way, a single species, one that had no right to defy the Dominion, was burning entire fleets. And for the first time in Dominion history, a high-ranking officer spoke words that had never before been uttered. "They are winning." Vishkar's blood ran cold. "No," he whispered. "No, that's impossible." But it wasn't. It was real, and it was only the beginning. Silent hunters in the void. The Dominion had spent centuries cultivating fear. Their name was whispered across the stars, their rule etched into the bones of conquered civilizations. They were absolute, unchallenged, unstoppable. Until now. Because tonight, something hunted them in the dark. The Excalibur moved like a phantom, silent, invisible, a whisper of death between the stars. Cloaked beneath layers of cutting-edge human stealth tech and salvaged Dominion shielding, it prowled through the wreckage of the orbital battle. On board, Commander Alexis Voss stood in the command bay, watching the tactical displays. The Dominion fleet had been thrown into disarray after the uprising, scrambling to counter attacks across every continent. Now, they were vulnerable. Now, they were prey. The Excalibur was humanity's last, greatest secret, a warship unlike anything ever seen before. Born in the hidden shipyards of Mars, it was designed for a singular purpose, to be the blade in the dark, the vengeance they never saw coming. And tonight, the Dominion would learn fear. Target acquired. The voice came from Lieutenant Elias Rowe, weapons officer and former Dominion POW. His hands hovered over the ship's weapon systems, muscles tense with barely contained fury. On the screen, a Dominion dreadnought, the harbinger of order, loomed like a monolith of oppression. One of the largest ships in the Dominion fleet, it had crushed entire planetary insurrections. It was said to be unbreachable. Voss smirked. "Let's test that theory." From the shadows, Dr. Iris Song, the lead AI specialist, tapped at her console. The Excalibur's onboard intelligence, ARES, had already infiltrated the Harbinger's systems. Security codes, firewalls, communications, they were all compromised before the Dominion even knew they were being watched. "Ares, what's their status?" Voss asked. The AI's voice was cold, efficient, human-like, but not quite. The Harbinger's defenses are engaged at minimal capacity. Primary control has been rerouted to manual systems. Probability of counterattack, 4.7%. In other words, they were defenseless. Voss turned toward her crew. How poetic. They spent decades thinking they were invincible. Now, they're a carcass waiting to be carved open. A beat of silence. Then, Steele's voice came through the comms. "Do it!" The crew didn't hesitate. The Excalibur struck first. A precision railgun blast pierced the dreadnought's central engine core, sending a shockwave through its structure. Within seconds, explosions rippled along the hull, tearing through decks, rupturing atmosphere shields, sending hundreds of Dominion officers screaming into the void. "Direct hit!" Rowe shouted, eyes ablaze with vengeance. The Harbinger lurched, its emergency thrusters struggling to compensate. Fires engulfed entire sections, cutting off escape routes. Inside the dying ship, Dominion officers panicked. "Report!" bellowed Commander Krathvos, his mandibles twitching in fear. "Shields failing! Engines compromised! Security feeds are down! We've been hacked!" Krathvos felt something he had never known in his lifetime. Helplessness. Then the final blow came. The Excalibur fired its main plasma lance, the beam slicing through the Harbinger's core like a surgical blade, detonating its reactor in a sunburst of fire and molten metal. The Dominion dreadnought, a ship that had once terrorized 100 worlds, was annihilated in under 60 seconds, and the galaxy had just been given a message. From the orbital citadel, Vishkar watched in horror as the Harbinger of Order, one of their most powerful warships, was reduced to wreckage. Silence gripped the Dominion command chamber. "This is impossible," whispered Admiral Tarkor. His claws trembled. One ship, one single human ship did this? Vishkar turned, eyes wide with something alien to his kind. Dread. This wasn't war. This was something else. A phantom. A ghost. The last remnant of a species they had tried to bury. He clawed at his throne, shaking, watching the flames consume what was once a proud Dominion vessel. It was happening. The humans weren't just rebelling. They were hunting. On the Excalibur's bridge, the crew watched as the Harbinger's remains drifted into space. No cheering, no celebration, only grim satisfaction. Because they knew. This was just the beginning. Steele's voice cut through the silence. The Dominion just learned something. He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. They thought they buried us. Thought we were broken. Thought we were done. His eyes burned with the fury of 20 years of enslavement. They forgot one thing. Voss smirked. Rowe tightened his grip on the console. The entire crew felt it, the weight of history shifting in their favor. Steele leaned forward. Ghosts always come back. And then, the Excalibur vanished into the void. A whisper, a shadow. The harbinger of humanity's vengeance. The fire spreads. The Dominion had ruled with absolute power for centuries. They had never known fear. But now, they knew. The harbinger of order was gone, reduced to nothing but twisted metal drifting in the void. The orbital citadel, once a symbol of Dominion supremacy over Earth, now stood as a fortress under siege. Across the conquered worlds, resistance cells that had once been small flickers of defiance exploded into coordinated, ruthless uprisings. It wasn't just rebellion, it was war. From the shipyards of Mars to the frozen wastes of Europa, from the sprawling slums of Orion 7 to the deep space prisons in the Aldebaran sector, humanity had risen. And now, they weren't just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for the galaxy. The Dominion's last stand from his throne aboard the Primarch's Wrath, the flagship of the Dominion's ruling council, Supreme Overlord Zilvas watched in disbelief. His claws tightened around the armrests of his seat as reports poured in. Worlds were falling, not just to humans, but to others. Zelvari, Tharnak, Jacoran, species who had lived under Dominion rule for generations, were turning on their masters. They had seen what humanity had done, what they had become. And they realized a simple, terrifying truth. If the humans could stand against the Dominion, maybe they could too. A low growl rumbled in Silvas's throat. This is unacceptable, he spat. Vishkar, once the powerful governor of Sol, now a shaken, hollowed-out shell of himself, dared not meet his gaze. Supreme Overlord, You failed, Zilvas hissed, his mandibles clicking with rage. You told me the humans were pacified, that they were broken. Vishkar trembled, his once pristine robes stained with fear sweat. I didn't think— No, you didn't. Zilva's clawed hand lashed out, wrapping around Vishkar's throat in a crushing grip. There was a reason we never let them grow too strong, Zilva snarled. They were always different. Vishkar choked, gasping, claws scrambling against his overlord's iron grip. Do you hear them now, Governor? Zilvas whispered, leaning close. Do you hear the whispers? The stories? They call them ghosts, monsters. Vishkar's bulging eyes darted to the comm display. Across the Dominion, fear spread like a virus. The humans had no central government, no empire, no formal military force. Yet they were winning. And that was terrifying. The Dominion was not defeated. Not yet. The largest Dominion fleet in recorded history, over 3,000 warships, converged at Titan's grave, a dead moon orbiting a dying star. They came prepared for total annihilation. Humanity met them there. Steel stood on the bridge of the ISS Vengeance, watching the incoming Dominion fleet. The largest force ever assembled. A storm of ships, bristling with weapons, moving in brutal formation. A challenge. He turned to his officers. Voss, Rowe, Vasquez, O'Donnell. Every single one of them had fought tooth and nail just to stand here today. He exhaled, slow and steady. No more running, no more hiding. Vasquez grinned. About damn time. Across the human fleet, ships uncloaked. Dozens of Dominion vessels that had been stolen, modified, rebuilt for war. Their hulls bore the mark of the resistance, a broken chain engulfed in fire. Steel opened a channel. Every human ship, every allied fleet. His voice rang out like thunder. Today, the Dominion learns fear. No more chains, no more masters. We end them here. The battle began. A galaxy on fire. The void erupted. Plasma lances and railgun fire ripped through the dark, cutting ships apart in brilliant bursts of white-hot flame. The Dominion fought like cornered beasts. They threw everything they had. But the humans fought like monsters. The Excalibur was the ghost in the machine, slipping between Dominion formations, hacking systems, turning their own defenses against them. ISS Vengeance led the charge, its stolen Dominion weaponry firing at point-blank range, shattering hulls, ripping apart flagships. And on the ground, legions of freed slaves, defectors, and human shock troopers landed on Dominion-controlled moons and tore through the enemy like a wildfire. They had spent 20 years in chains. Now it was the Dominion's turn to kneel. On the Primarch's wrath, Zilvas watched his empire burn, his invincible fleet gone, his unbreakable armies shattered, his species doomed. For the first time in his life, the Supreme Overlord felt true, primal terror. The humans were coming. They weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting to erase him. And then the final message came, a direct transmission. Steele's face appeared on the view screen, scarred, tired, unyielding. Zilvas's blood ran cold. Supreme Overlord, Steele said, voice sharp as a blade. I know you can hear me. The human leaned forward, eyes burning with righteous fury. This is your only warning. Zilvas swallowed. Warning? Steele's lips curled into a wolf's grin. Run! And then the screen went black. Zilvas's trembling claws hovered over the emergency retreat command. His officers stared at him, waiting. They had no more fleets, no more reinforcements. And for the first time in Dominion history, they ran. Enjoying the story? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Should humanity chase the fleeing Dominion or let them suffer in exile? What would you do? The silence after war. The battle was over. Titan's grave, once a dead moon circling a dying star, was now a graveyard of ships. The Dominion's greatest fleet, 3,000 warships, burned, broken, lost to the void. Among the wreckage, the ISS Vengeance drifted in eerie silence. Its hull was scorched, its weapons exhausted, but it still stood. Just like humanity. Inside the bridge, General Marcus Steele sat in silence, staring at the carnage. Victory. After 20 years of chains, after lifetimes of suffering, after watching his people die in the Dominion's work camps, executed for sport, ground into nothing but labor and ash. This was the moment they had fought for. So why did it feel hollow? The survivor's plea. A ping on the comms. "General," Commander Alexis Voss said, voice tight, "we're receiving a distress signal." Steele frowned. "From where?" Voss hesitated. "From them." Steele turned sharply. "The Dominion!" Voss nodded. "They're surrendering." Silence fell over the bridge. A weight settled over the crew. Surrender. For 20 years, the Dominion had butchered them. For 20 years, the Dominion had torn their families apart. Now they wanted mercy. Steele clenched his fists. "I want eyes on them," he ordered. Now. A broken empire. The holo display flickered, revealing the shattered remains of the Primarch's Wrath, the Dominion flagship. Once a symbol of absolute power, it now drifted aimlessly. Fires flickered inside its hull, its engines sputtering, debris scattering into the abyss. And on the bridge, Supreme Overlord Zilvus appeared, bloodied, trembling, eyes hollow with fear. "Human," he rasped. "Please, listen." Steele's stomach twisted. Zilvus, the architect of humanity's suffering, the one who had given the order to enslave Earth, the one who had mocked their resistance, laughed as their people were dragged into forced labor, crushed beneath Dominion boots. And now he begged. "We are finished," Zilvus continued. His once proud mandibles quivered. "You have won. The Dominion is shattered. We are..." He swallowed, the words bitter in his mouth. "We are at your mercy." The council divides, Steele's gut burned. Mercy. The word itself felt like a betrayal. He turned to his officers. "Thoughts?" Captain Raul Vasquez folded his arms, voice a growl. "After everything they did, we should erase them." Lieutenant Elias Rowe, the weapons officer, slammed his fist on the console. "No mercy, not after what they did to my family." Voss, ever the pragmatist, sighed. "I don't disagree. But let's be smart. If we slaughter them all, what does that make us?" Silence. Steele hated that she was right. For 20 years they had fought against oppression. For 20 years they had claimed to be better than the Dominion. But was that still true? Or had war turned them into something else? He exhaled sharply. "What about you, O'Donnell?" Lena O'Donnell, the hacker who had crippled Dominion networks, leaned against the console, eyes dark with exhaustion. "I think we let them suffer." Vasquez raised a brow. "What?" She gestured at the holo display. "They're already dead. Their empire's collapsing. Their fleets are gone. They've lost everything. Let them rot." It was tempting. Steele stared at the screen. Zilvus, Vishkar, the last of the Dominion's high command. Pathetic, weak, shadows of the monsters they once were. He could wipe them out, end them with a single command. But then what? Would the war truly end? Or would he become the very thing he swore to destroy? He closed his eyes. A decision had to be made. The choice Steele stepped forward, staring directly into Zilvus's eyes. "You're right about one thing," he said coldly. "We won." Zilvus nodded desperately. Then you'll accept our surrender?" Steele exhaled. "No." Zilvus flinched. Vasquez grinned. Rose smirked, but Steele wasn't finished. "You enslaved my people," he said. "Tore our world apart, killed billions." His jaw tightened. "You don't get to surrender." Zilvas gasped. Please, but I won't exterminate you." The Supreme Overlord froze. Steele's eyes burned with a new kind of fury. "No," he whispered. "You'll live." He let the words sink in. "Your empire is dead. Your people are scattered. Your fleets are gone." His voice was like ice. "You will live with the knowledge that you lost." Zilvas shuddered. "This is your punishment," Steele said, voice low. "Not death. Oblivion." And then he cut the transmission. The aftermath. The Dominion fled. With no fleets, no armies, and no leaders, they scattered across the stars like cowards. Worlds they once ruled turned against them. The species they had enslaved rose in revolt. The Dominion no longer existed, but humanity. Humanity was stronger than ever. For the first time in history, Earth was not just a single planet. It was a power, a force, a legend, and the galaxy would never forget. The galaxy watches. The Dominion was gone. Its fleets had been shattered. Its rulers had fled into the void, nameless, faceless ghosts, hiding, scurrying like rats in the gutters of the universe they once commanded. But the war was not over, because war does not end with a single battle. It does not fade when the victors rise from the ashes. War leaves scars, and humanity had been scarred deeper than any species before them. Now, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would become. Would they be conquerors? Would they avenge every atrocity with fire and blood? Or would they do something else, something no one expected? The purge begins. The ISS, Vengeance hung in orbit above Zerket, one of the last remaining strongholds of the Dominion remnants. On its bridge, General Marcus Steele stood with his officers, staring at the burning planet below. Resistance on the surface had collapsed. What little was left of the Dominion's scattered forces had barricaded themselves inside their last bunkers, not as warriors, but as cowards. Their desperate messages flooded every comm channel. "Please, we surrender. We will serve. We will kneel. Just spare us." Steele's jaw clenched. How many times had humanity said those same words? How many times had Earth begged for mercy, only to be met with laughter? How many children had been dragged from their homes? How many families had been torn apart? How many voices had cried for help, only to be ignored? He turned to Voss. "Send the signal." Voss gave a grim nod and activated the fleet-wide transmission. "This is General Steele," he said. His voice was cold, unshaken, absolute. "The Dominion is dead, but its remnants still cling to life, still hide in the shadows, still believe they have a place in this galaxy. They don't." A pause. His next words sealed their fate. "Burn it down." Fires in the dark. From orbit, the human fleet unleashed hell. Railguns punched through planetary shields like they were paper. Orbital bombardments reduced entire cities to dust. Plasma lances carved trenches into the planet's surface, turning oceans to steam, melting steel and bone alike. On the ground, human shock troops marched through the ruins, crushing the last pockets of resistance. No more mercy, no more diplomacy. Only retribution. The Dominion had erased Earth's history. Now, humanity would erase them, one planet at a time. The Council's warning. The war was over, but the galaxy was changing. From the high towers of the Zelvari Council, the most powerful alliance of neutral species in the known universe, Chancellor Draxeth watched the fall of Zerket with growing unease. Beside him, the ambassadors of a dozen species spoke in hushed whispers, fear creeping into their voices. "The humans are unstoppable. They do not conquer, but they do not forgive. They were victims, but now," Draxeth narrowed his reptilian eyes, "now they are something else." The humans had not claimed territory. They had not declared themselves rulers of the stars. But they had not stopped killing, either. And that was more terrifying than any empire. For centuries, the Dominion had been the great terror of the galaxy. Now, humanity was the storm on the horizon. Droxeth exhaled. Something had to be done. The reckoning of Vishkar. Deep in the outer rim, in a forgotten system where the stars barely cast their light, a single Dominion cruiser drifted through space. On board, Vishkar, former governor of Sol, architect of Earth's enslavement, cowered in his private chamber. His claws trembled as he watched the broadcasts. Humanity had not stopped. They had not slowed. They were hunting them. He turned, frantic, as his personal guard stood at attention. "We need to run! Now, they're coming!" A pause, then a voice, calm, cold, and utterly inescapable. "There is nowhere left to run, Governor." The guards didn't move. Vishkar whipped around, only to see them standing stiffly, eyes blank, bodies frozen. And then, they collapsed. Behind them, a figure stepped out of the shadows, a human. Her silhouette was sharp, her eyes like dying stars, her expression unreadable. Lena O'Donnell, cyber warfare specialist, the woman who had crippled the Dominion's networks, the woman who had watched her parents die in chains, and now, the woman who held Vishkar's fate in her hands. Vishkar stumbled back, his throat dry. "Please!" O'Donnell smirked. Something special. She activated it. A small, glowing holo display flickered to life, and Vishkar saw them. Every screen on every Dominion outpost, every broadcast channel, every signal in the known galaxy. His face, his crimes, his confession. Edited, manipulated, woven into the worst version of himself. He was not just a fugitive anymore. He was the most hunted man in the universe. O'Donnell leaned in close, her breath warm against his trembling mandibles. "You enslaved my people," she whispered. "Now?" She pressed the button. Every Dominion slave world, every species they had oppressed, received the message. And then O'Donnell smiled. "Now they get their turn." She turned and walked away, as Vishkar screamed, the turning of an age. The Dominion was gone, its leaders hunted, its worlds burning, its people scattered, lost, forsaken. But humanity remained, and in the depths of space, on the bridge of the ISS Vengeance, General Steele stared at the stars. A voice crackled over the comms. "Orders, sir?" He exhaled. The war was over, but the future, that was still unwritten. Steele closed his eyes and gave the command. "Let's go home." The silence. After the storm, for the first time in centuries, the Dominion was no more. Their fleets burned, their rulers hunted, their legacy dust. The war was over. But victory was not peace. The galaxy had been reshaped, not by treaties or negotiations, but by fire and blood. And now, as the last remnants of the Dominion vanished into history, one question remained. What would humanity become? The return to Earth. The ISS Vengeance descended through Earth's atmosphere, its engines roaring like a storm breaking across the sky. Below, billions of people stood in silence, watching the ship that had carried them to war return home. They had fought, they had suffered, they had survived. And now they would build. The capital of Old Earth, once a broken ruin under Dominion rule, was alive again. Cities had been rebuilt, streets illuminated, the sky no longer darkened by alien overseers. Humanity was free. But as General Marcus Steele stepped out onto the landing platform, he felt the weight of the future pressing down on his shoulders. The war had defined them. What came next would shape them forever. The Galactic Summit months later, aboard the Ark of Concord, the first human-led interstellar summit convened in orbit above Earth. Leaders from across the stars gathered in uneasy silence. They had once dismissed humans as weak, inferior, unworthy. Now they feared them. At the head of the council, Steele stood, his gaze sweeping over the delegation. The Zelvari, the Tharnak, the Jikoran, even the Dominion's former vassal states, all had come, not out of respect, but because they had no other choice. Steele's voice was calm, steady, but it carried the weight of a war that had changed the universe. For centuries, the Dominion ruled through terror, through chains, through enslavement. Silence. He let the words sink in. They thought themselves invincible, thought we would kneel forever. He exhaled, his gaze unwavering. They were wrong. A murmur rippled through the council chamber. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted, uncomfortable. Steele leaned forward. Humanity will not rule through fear. We will not become what we destroyed. But make no mistake, his eyes burned. We will never be slaves again. He straightened. The Dominion is gone. The galaxy is free. And now, a choice must be made. He let the words hang in the air. Will we rebuild together? A pause. Or will we fight again? The room held its breath. Then, slowly, one by one, the ambassadors stood. First, the Zelvari Chancellor, then the Tharnak Warlord, then the others. Steele didn't smile, not yet. But for the first time in history, the galaxy was not bound by fear. It was bound by possibility. A new legacy. On Earth, in the ruins of what was once Washington, D.C., a monument stood tall. A black obelisk engraved with the names of those who had fought, who had died, who had never lived to see the future they had bled for. At its base, a simple inscription, "We do not kneel." Steele stood before it, his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Alexis Voss sighed. "We should be celebrating." He exhaled. "We should." But his mind was elsewhere, because war was simple. You knew who the enemy was. But peace was dangerous. Voss studied him. "You're not done, are you?" Steele shook his head. "The Dominion is gone, but the galaxy still remembers them. What they built, what they did." His jaw tightened. "Someone will try to replace them." Voss crossed her arms. "And when they do?" Steele's expression was unreadable. "Then we remind them why the Dominion fell." The final transmission across the stars, a final message echoed. It was not a threat. It was not a declaration of war. It was a promise. We are not conquerors. We are not slavers. We do not rule through fear, but we remember, and we do not forget. To those who seek war, to those who think to enslave, to oppress, to rule through chains, look upon the ashes of the Dominion, and know this: humanity stands. The transmission ended. The message was clear. Humanity had risen, and the stars would never be the same again. Thank you for joining this journey. What do you think? Should humanity rule with an iron fist or guide the galaxy toward a new era? Drop a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic sci-fi adventures.